Hi everybody, it's Datum. So I've been sitting here for a little while. Well, we've had a lot of stuff going on in the house, so couldn't really record until now. But I've been thinking a lot about what am I gonna bring to my audience and what kind of thing can I do to make what you're doing with RPGs more valuable. And I've gone over a bunch of things in my head. There's a lot of things, a lot of types of content out there. The only thing I can think of at this point that I can do that's a little bit different is some of those things that I've done that have been different with doing professional storytelling and kind of going outside of the nuts and bolts of what I did to get started. I actually made a couple of episodes of a podcast that was called the Pro GM Podcast. I didn't really keep going with it because the topic of the podcast was just me talking about what I did when it came to being a professional storyteller for 2.5 years. So I kind of put that out there. There was a little bit more. I had the who, what, when, where, why. I was going to do 5 episodes, but then I kind of looked at what I had and I was like, that's like 90% of it. Like, what else am I going to talk about? So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk more about what are the things that I've done that I feel like are above and beyond when it comes to different types of ways to play Dungeons and Dragons. Really, there's kind of like I would say there's three types, really. There's totally using published material. You're just going through an adventure, you have a campaign setting, and maybe you're filling in the gaps as you go, but there's a lot of stuff that's already there. Then there's Sandbox D&D where you're really just using the core rules of the system. And then there's kind of in the middle, which what I like calling modular D&D, which is you have certain things that you can pop into different parts of the world and you're still kind of building the world as you go. So I'm going to kind of lay those three things out and then kind of what I've done in the situations where I've been playing those different things and how I went about it. Before I get totally into that, make sure if you haven't already that you like, hit the bell, and get ready to leave some comments on what you think about what I'm talking about today and how it's helped you or what other tips do you have that you could add on top of this. So the first kind that I'm going to talk about is probably what most people have actually played, which is almost 100% published material D&D. You have a starter set, you have campaign setting, you have an adventure book, and you are mostly staying within the framework of that, and you're going through and having the experience that's pretty much been laid out for you. It's really a lot simpler to do this, especially when you first start. I know when I started, I actually bought the core books first, and then I read them all and leafed through some of the things that were more reference. I was like, this is a lot of stuff and it's really cool, but it's like, how do you actually do it? So from there, I actually ended up buying the Dungeons and Dragons starter set, and I started back at third edition, but this will work with any edition. And really, right now, fifth edition is what's in print, and it's a pretty good system. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. And I'm going to have some affiliate links for some of these materials in this video today. So if you get interested through there, you'll support Daily Datum, and I would really appreciate it. So I took the starter set, and it really was just like, how do you do this mechanically? Like, when do you roll the dice? When do you look for things? Is going through a dungeon actually going to feel for a group of players? So I don't know if I would have ever gotten to that point if I didn't have the starter set. Box sets have kind of been the way that Dungeons and Dragons was marketed, and there are a lot of RPGs today that don't have their box set. So really, I've been talking to some of the creators that I know that are doing things with systems you probably never heard of, like Chronicles of Ember or Althos RPG. And these guys, they have a huge amount of material, enormous amount of material, and the real challenge for them is to get people introduced to the game. And what I'm trying to tell them is they must put together something that is an equivalent of a box set. It doesn't have to actually be a box in a game or whatever. We've kind of gotten to the point where a lot of people have dice. There's a lot of places to get things. You don't have to like actually put it together in a box, but you have to give people the material to be able to put together, if they want to print out a map or if they want to, make some of these physical things to go along with their game, that they can. It's essential that these introductory things really kind of step you through how to play the game. I think there have been different levels of how they've done that with the different editions of Dungeons and Dragons. And I know in 5th edition it seems like they really just kind of they give you the box set, they have kind of the quick start rules and how to run combat, but in 3rd edition they actually had some introductory like baby steps of, okay, we're going to do this little encounter. And this little encounter doesn't have to be part of any kind of campaign setting or story or anything like that, but this one is. It actually is like there are pre-generated characters in the thing, and you're kind of going through this little scenario, but it's more just to learn how to play the game mechanically. It's really not a lot about role-playing or anything like that. It's really just like, okay, well, if you're going to use a board and you're going to use squares, this is how you're going to play the game. I thought that was really helpful. It really got me really stepped in, and the people that I was playing with really just taking those very basic first steps and actually getting into it. There really wasn't much role playing on that, and a lot of these times when you're first starting with this kind of material, you're not going to be doing a lot of role playing. It's going to be a lot of, okay, I'm in the dungeon and here's some skeletons and I'm going to go bash them until they try to not murder me, and then we're going to go from there. That's really where I've seen that everybody that kind of starts from the mechanics angle of the game instead of like some kind of story idea for the game come in. So I feel like even with the Lost Mines of Phandelver and the 5th edition box set, that's where people are going to come in. The other quick thing that I want to touch on with basically boxed and created, however you want to think about it, modules and campaign books and those kind of things, is that it's pretty low prep. You as the dungeon master probably want to be a couple of chapters ahead of everybody else just so you know have a decent idea of what's going on, and it's something that I think is approachable by anybody really. As a dungeon master, the actual setting of you and your friends either around a table or using something like a virtual tabletop with Fantasy Grounds or something like that, in those situations you really just kind of have to have the basic familiarity with the rules, and there's quick reference for a few things, like if you have things like conditions or those kind of things, you shouldn't really need a whole lot of prep or really a whole lot of confidence in your ability to be a dungeon master. So it's the base step into becoming a dungeon master that I would hope would make it easy enough for everybody to give it a shot. No matter if you think you're going to be a player forever or whatever, really, if you're going to be in this hobby, at some point you're going to be a game master and you will be kind of regarded as one forever. And if you're not ready for that, really, you're just kind of sitting around with friends or, people you met online or whatever once in a while, and sometimes you're going to be there and sometimes you're going to disappear, and really it's like you don't have that much investment in the hobby. And that's fine. I mean, people got their priorities and stuff, but if you want to take this game and you want to put in some effort, that effort is really going to translate at some point to where, oh, well, I know this game enough to where I could actually run it. It's a lot of work. It's different than coming as a player to a table. And I guess I'm opening this up with the pre-made material because if you really want to play the game, if you want to have more opportunities to play the game, there's a huge shortage of people that want to run games. And it's mostly because of how much work it is. But really, I think if you have a good perspective of what the work actually is and what you're actually doing, you can figure out how to have a great time with it. So from there, I'm going to move on to kind of modular D&D. So this is the idea that I kind of evolved from just the playset when I was coming up playing Dungeons and Dragons. You have some materials, you have maybe some adventures, or you found some dungeons or some little things online, or pieced together some ideas, and maybe some of that you've actually made yourself at this point. And really, what you're doing is you're creating an area where people can adventure a little bit more openly. But really, what you're trying to do is you're trying to slot in these things that are content that you have some familiarity with, that you can basically put in front of your players. And some people might be like, this is like railroading people into content, but really it's like when you have open imagination, at some point you can always stick in these elements. So having those elements ready and really having a good grasp of what's there and why it's there and a little bit of context will make it to where you don't have to do so much on the fly prep. The game can still go at a pretty reasonable pace, and your players should feel like, well, okay, we're doing our thing, but there are things that are out there, and that's at some point we're gonna experience them. So that's kind of how modular D&D works, and that's been a lot of fun. I think that was really kind of where I was at when I was in high school, and I never kind of moved beyond that. So moving away from that, now you're into completely sandbox D&D. And getting to that level of being able to run D&D, well, it takes, well, before, let's say before virtual tabletops, it was it was an insane thing to ask somebody to do. It's just you would have so many books and things open and references and want to cross-reference things and tables and all kinds of stuff that it's just it's possible, but it's just unless you have things a lot of the literature committed to memory, you're not going to be able to do it very successfully or at any speed. And that's the big thing is like really keeping your players engaged and interested when it comes to having to stop and really think about things in a way to create things on the fly. It's easier in other systems. Like I think the Cypher system with Numenera is probably one of the easiest when it comes to creating things on the fly because that's the way that the game has been made. But with Dungeons and Dragons, it's a lot more, okay, here's this place, here's these people, here's this villain, make it work. And that's good and bad. It means that the things that are created outside of you having to create everything, they have their own little flavor and their own history and things that you can draw. When you're trying to do all that with no reference, without doing modular things, it's possible. But I think really the opportunity here is with virtual tabletops because with a virtual tabletop, you can have a bunch of things open in pretty easy reference. You can use tables right in the virtual tabletop, and you can do all these cross-reference things that you wouldn't have been able to do in the past at a speed to where you're probably not going to lose the attention of the people that you're playing with. It still takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of even technical knowledge of getting everybody into something like Discord or a voice chat of some kind, and then also being able to get them in the virtual tabletop and everybody to be able to be there and be able to leverage some of the virtual tabletop things like advanced character creation and macros and those kind of things. It is not like a video game in the way that you can't just sit down and play. So I wanted to do this brief overview. It's probably going to become almost a whole day's worth of material, but this is like the different ways that you can play, and I wanted to talk about those before I started talking about things like pure world building. There is real opportunity in any of those parts to really just pick up what you can do and what you're confident with on that continuum of everything already being authored to Sandbox D&D, and you as somebody that's interested in the hobby to take it and actually play it. And I've been kind of experimenting around with ideas, and I'm going to try this too. I'm going to do some content for TikTok and Twitter, and I'm going to try and do things to where they could be interactive. The big thing that I see when it comes to, playing and world building and that kind of stuff, at least in my situation, is sometimes I don't have the ability to sit down right now and schedule a game, because the main work that I'm doing right now isn't on a regular schedule, and then I have another job that I'm doing for another 8 weeks that has a regular schedule, but it's going to actually be a expanded schedule. So actually being able to play with other people is something that I'm not going to be able to do. So what I think I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to create characters, and I'm going to play the Dungeon Master and the characters and the monsters, and that's how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it as if I was actually playing with people, and I'm going to put out content on a, you know, more than daily basis of just what happened, who said what, roles, scenes, all these little things. And me personally, I'm not like the best visual artist, but what I'm going to try and do is do some like basically storyboard sketching and that kind of stuff. And hopefully there will be you out there that are interested in what's going on, and you'll add your little pieces and, like maybe your little ideas on what people might do, or even maybe somebody might actually pick up a character and play it alongside. But I don't know. It's kind of, the more people that you put into the mix, the harder it is to make sure that you have things coming out on a regular basis. So I'm going to experiment around with this. I know I've talked about World Anvil in some videos a couple of weeks ago, and I still want to do that, but I'm not really to the world building stage yet. I think I wanted to get some content out there about how to use what is already in the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual of 5th edition, to where you don't actually have to buy other supplements to get value, a lot of value, if you put in some of your own creativity into some of these systems and some of the random tables and all the tools that are actually in the reference material already. So that's what I'm going to focus on going into right now. And then after that, I'm going to really dig in on my own world building as a example of what you could do. And you'll see that once you start putting things in, that you get them to a certain degree of being fleshed out. But really, if you go any farther, it's not worth it to go any farther, because people are going to take the content and they're going to fill in what they want. And so you can have some canon that's established, but you want to have a lot of area in the canon and the lore to where people can take it and make it their own. That's what I'm kind of like looking for, is like creating this backbone with content that people can share and talk about and have a commonality between that backbone, but then after that they can talk about what they did with it, because that's really the hard thing, is really taking this hobby and showing it to people in a concrete way in something like social media content or YouTube videos, to where people will get it and will care. Because if you go into things where it's all about this party and it's all about what these people did and it's all about this specific case, I don't think that people are really engaged with that. It's got to be something back and forth. It's got to be something that they can think about, okay, well, here's what we had and here's what we did, but we're going to talk about this common thread and where that common thread might be going. So that's what I'm going to be trying to set up here. This has been a great experience. I'm learning a lot of stuff every day. I think I'm going to do a little bit more work on the videos. I know I still need to put in end cards and some of those kind of things to link around to videos, and I'm going to start doing that more. there's a whole lot to the social media stuff that is behind the scenes. But it looks like once you kind of get it together and you learn how to do it, you can do things pretty quickly once you've gone through doing them and learning them a few times. So I'm really looking forward to that. This has been great. I hope you guys have enjoyed. I want to hear what you think about my ideas and about these three kind of rough on a continuum ideas of how to play Dungeons and Dragons, how they work, and how they've worked for you in the past. So this has been Daily Datum, and I will see you in the next video.